I was standing in the nursery we'd spent 3 months designing, 8 months pregnant, my lower back screaming as I folded tiny onuses that cost more than my old car payment. The late afternoon sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Parker estate, making everything look like a museum display. Cold. Perfect. Nothing like the warm, chaotic nursery I'd imagined as a girl. I was alone. Or I thought I was. That's when I started talking to myself, something I'd gotten used to in this massive, silent house. I just hope he doesn't resent me someday, I whispered to the empty room, smoothing my hand over a butter-yellow sleeper. Hope he doesn't look at his black mama and his white daddy and think I trapped him. Think I was just some girl after his money who got pregnant on purpose. My voice cracked. I was crying now, hormones and isolation doing their brutal work. Then, from directly behind me, a voice. Deep. Commanding. Unmistakably real. You never have to worry about that, Viola. The odyssey dropped from my hands. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance, my pregnant belly throwing off my center of gravity. Michael was standing there in the doorway, still in his work clothes, his blue eyes fixed on me with an intensity I'd seen 1,000 times but suddenly didn't recognize. My deaf husband. The man I'd learned an entire language for. The man who'd never, in 2 years, made a single sound. Had just spoken. If you're still here and want to know what happens next, please like, subscribe and drop a comment telling me the craziest lie someone ever told you in a relationship. I'll reply to every single one. Your story might even inspire the next chapter. Let me take you back. Let me show you how a 29-year-old graphic designer from Oakland ended up in a Silicon Valley mansion, married to a man she'd never heard speak, carrying a baby that was supposed to fix everything. I'm 35 now. We're still married, barely, some days, stronger than ever, other days. And I've learned that some love stories don't start with music and moonlight. Some start with silence and lies. It was 2 years earlier, and I was broke. Not I need to budget better broke. Legitimately 3 jobs and still can't make rent broke. My graphic design degree was gathering dust while I worked overnight shifts retouching photos for a stock image company, bartended on weekends, and picked up catering gigs whenever I could. That's how I ended up at the Pinnacle Tech Gala in Palo Alto, wearing an ill-fitting white shirt and black pants, carrying trays of champagne for people who spent more on watches than I made in a year. The ballroom was obscene. Crystal chandeliers. Ice sculptures. A string quartet playing something expensive and boring. I was invisible to these people. Just another brown hand holding a tray, refilling glasses, cleaning up their messes. Then I saw him. Michael Parker was standing alone near the floor-to-ceiling windows, physically present but completely removed from the chaos around him. While everyone else was networking, laughing too loud at unfunny jokes, performing their success, he was still watching. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair styled conservatively and a suit that probably cost more than my car. But it was his eyes that caught me. Pale blue, intensely focused, tracking people's mouths as they spoke to each other. He looked lonely in a room full of hundreds. A tech bro in a purple Patagonia vest brushed past Michael without acknowledgement, then turned to his buddy and said, loud enough for me to hear, "That's Parker. Deaf as a doornail since some accident. Brilliant guy, but what's the point of coming to these things if you can't even network, right?" Something in my chest tightened. I'd spent my entire life being underestimated, being looked past, having people make assumptions about what I could or couldn't do based on how I looked, where I came from, how I sounded. And here was this man, wealthy, white, probably never wanted for anything, experiencing his own version of invisibility. Before I could talk myself out of it, I walked over. I didn't know any sign language, didn't know what I was doing. But I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, and typed, "The guy in the purple vest is an idiot. You're not missing anything interesting." I turned the screen toward him. Michael's eyes met mine for the first time, and I swear something shifted. He smiled, not the polite, distant smile rich people give service workers, but something genuine and surprised. He pulled out his own phone. "Thank you. These events are performance art. I'm only here because my mother insisted. Same. Except my landlord insisted. His smile widened. He typed again. You're a terrible caterer if you're spending this much time talking to guests. You're a terrible guest if you're hiding by the windows instead of networking. We spent the next 20 minutes like that, passing phones back and forth like middle schoolers, standing by those windows while the gala swirled around us. He asked about my design work. I asked about his company. He didn't talk down to me. Didn't perform. In a room full of noise, his silence felt like the only honest thing. When my supervisor shot me a look that meant get back to work, Michael typed one last message. Can I take you to dinner? Somewhere quiet where we can actually talk? I should have said no. Should have recognized the impossible distance between our worlds. But I was 29, exhausted, and so desperately tired of being alone. Yes. That dinner turned into another. Then another. Within 3 months, I'd enrolled in ASL classes at the community college. Within 6 months, I could sign fluently enough to have real conversations. Within 8 months, he proposed, with a ring that made my hands look small and a sign language speech that made me cry. His mother, Eleanor Parker, smiled tightly at our engagement party and said, "How wonderful that Michael found someone so dedicated." I signed back, confident and proud, "I love your son." Eleanor's smile never reached her eyes. "I'm sure you do, dear." I should have heard the skepticism in those words. Should have questioned why a tech millionaire's mother seemed so coldly approving of her son marrying a woman who worked 3 jobs and lived in a studio apartment. But I was in love. And love, I've learned, makes you deaf to warning signs. I grew up in Oakland in a house where the walls were thin and the love was thick. My mother cleaned houses in Piedmont and came home smelling like other people's lavender detergent. My father drove a bus for AC Transit for 30 years and died 2 months after retirement, like his body had been holding on just long enough to get that pension for Mama. I was their only child, their miracle baby, and they poured everything into making sure I got out. And I did get out. Sort of. I graduated from San Jose State with a degree in graphic design and a portfolio I was proud of. But 2019 wasn't kind to artists without connections, and I didn't have any. The design firms wanted 3 years' experience for entry-level positions. The tech companies wanted someone who could code. I sent out 200 applications in 6 months and got 5 interviews. No offers. So I worked. God, did I work. Overnight shifts retouching photos for a stock image company, turning regular people into the sanitized, ethnically ambiguous faces corporations loved. My eyes burned from staring at screens in the dark. Weekends I bartended at a spot in Jack London Square where tech tourists came to feel edgy. They'd tip well if you laughed at their jokes about disruption and didn't point out they were gentrifying the neighborhood my cousins got priced out of. Then there were the catering gigs. White shirt, black pants, invisible smile. I'd work birthday parties in Los Altos where they spent more on a child's petting zoo than my mother made in a month. I'd work corporate events where people threw away more food than I ate in a week. The Pinnacle Tech Gala was supposed to be just another shift. $300 for 6 hours of carrying trays and pretending not to hear the casual racism that came out after the second round of cocktails. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I was 29 and felt 40. Then I saw Michael Parker standing alone by those windows, and something in me recognized something in him. We were both performers in different ways. Me, performing invisibility. Him, performing deafness, though I wouldn't know that part for 2 more years. I walked over with my phone out and my heart pounding, and I changed my entire life. I just didn't know the cost yet. Our first real date was at a quiet cafe in Mountain View, the kind of place where they served $15 avocado toast and everyone was on their laptops pretending to work on the next big thing. Michael chose it deliberately, he said, because the lighting was good for reading lips and the tables were spaced far enough apart that we could focus on each other. I'd practiced signing for hours in front of my bathroom mirror. Good morning. How are you? I like coffee. My hands felt clumsy and too big, but Michael was patient. When I signed something wrong, he'd gently reshape my fingers, his touch warm and careful. When I got frustrated, he'd pull out his phone and we'd type back and forth, laughing at my autocorrect fails. The silence between us felt sacred somehow. Intentional. While everyone around us filled empty air with small talk and nervous chatter, we had to mean everything we said. Every sign, every written word, every expression carried weight. There was no hiding behind casual noise. He told me about his company in careful, deliberate signs. How he'd started it before the accident, how his business partner handled most of the talking now, how he'd learned to read people better in silence than he ever had with sound. I told him about my design dreams, my 3 jobs, my mother who still burned candles at church hoping I'd find a good man. We're looking at each other right now. I signed after our 3rd date, sitting in his car outside my studio apartment. He smiled, signed back, I like looking at you. No one had ever looked at me the way Michael did. Like I was the only person in the room, in the world, in his entire field of vision. His blue eyes tracked every movement of my mouth, every expression on my face. I felt seen in a way that made my chest ache. Our first kiss happened in week 4. No words, no sounds, just his hand on my cheek and his mouth on mine, and the most profound quiet I'd ever experienced. My previous boyfriends had filled silence with I want you and you're so beautiful and words that meant nothing. Michael's silence meant everything. I thought the inability to lie out loud made him incapable of lying at all. I thought silence was the same as honesty. I was wrong about so many things. Eleanor Parker lived in a Palo Alto estate that looked like it had been airlifted from the English countryside. Sprawling, manicured, aggressively white, from the columned entrance to the pale roses climbing the trellises. Michael's childhood home, though he'd long since moved to his own place in Los Altos Hills. He'd been dating for 3 months when he took me to meet her. I wore my best dress, a deep teal wrap that my mother said brought out my eyes. I'd practiced my signing until my hands cramped. I wanted to be perfect. Eleanor answered the door herself. No housekeeper buffer. She was tall like her son, silver-haired, wearing pearls and a cream cardigan that probably cost more than my car. Her smile was practiced and didn't reach her eyes. You must be Viola, she said, her gaze sweeping over me in one efficient assessment. How lovely. Please, come in. She didn't sign. Didn't even try. Just spoke directly to me while Michael stood there, supposedly unable to hear a word. I'd have to interpret for him, she knew that. It was a power move, subtle but deliberate. The sitting room was a museum of Parker family history. Old money. Old blood. Photo after photo of Michael at prep schools, on ski trips, at yacht clubs. Not a single brown face anywhere on those walls. Michael tells me you're a graphic designer, Eleanor said, settling into a wingback chair like a queen on a throne. How industrious. And you're working several jobs right now, is that correct? The way she said industrious made it sound like a character flaw. I am, I said, signing simultaneously for Michael. I'm building my portfolio while freelancing. And your family? They're from Oakland. There it was. The careful emphasis. Oakland, not Piedmont. Not Berkeley. Oakland, with all its implications. Yes. Born and raised. How colorful. Eleanor sipped her tea. You know, Michael's father, God rest him, always said that the most important thing in a marriage is shared values. Shared backgrounds. It makes everything so much simpler, don't you think? I felt Michael's hand find mine, squeeze gently. I think love is what makes things simple, I said. Eleanor's smile sharpened. Love. Yes. Well, you're young. You'll learn that love and compatibility aren't always the same thing. She was testing me, I thought. She was warning me, I know now. Michael proposed on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, 6 months after that gala. No words, just him on one knee with a ring that caught the sunset, signing I love you with his free hand. I cried so hard I could barely sign yes back. Eleanor's response was a thin smile and a comment about how quick everything was moving. My mother cried with joy and didn't ask any questions about why I was marrying a white millionaire she'd never met. She just saw her daughter finally getting the security she'd worked 3 jobs to give me. The wedding planning became my full-time obsession. I quit the bartending gig, kept the photo retouching for income, and threw myself into becoming the perfect deaf partner. I enrolled in advanced ASL courses at the community college. I joined deaf community meetups in San Francisco, sitting in circles of people who'd lived their entire lives in a culture I was desperately trying to inhabit in months. I learned the difference between C and ASL, between signing English and signing conceptually. I studied deaf history, read memoirs, watched documentaries. I wanted to understand Michael's world completely. I practiced until my hands moved faster than my thoughts, until signing felt as natural as breathing. The deaf community embraced me with warmth Eleanor never showed. They taught me slang, inside jokes, the subtle facial expressions that changed entire meanings. I felt like I'd found something precious, a language built on visibility, on watching, on paying attention in ways hearing people never had to. At one meetup, a deaf woman named Sandra asked me in fluid, rapid signs, "What happened to your fiancé? Why doesn't he come to these?" I fingerspelled back that he was busy with work, that his accident had happened later in life so he wasn't as connected to deaf culture. She looked skeptical but didn't push. Our wedding was small. Eleanor insisted on her country club, all white linens and classical music Michael supposedly couldn't hear. We had an ASL interpreter for the ceremony, and I signed my vows while speaking them aloud. Michael signed his back, his blue eyes never leaving my face. "I love you," he signed. "I will never lie to you." His hands were so steady, so sure. I believed every word those hands said. The deaf community friends I'd invited noticed Michael didn't quite sign like them. Hearing accent, I explained, defensive. They nodded politely and didn't say what they were thinking. I found out I was pregnant 3 months after the wedding. 2 pink lines in the marble bathroom of Michael's Los Altos Hills mansion that had somehow become mine. Our home, he always signed, but it never felt like ours. It felt like I was a guest in a museum, afraid to touch anything. Michael's reaction was joy, pure and uncomplicated. He spun me around the kitchen, signing baby over and over, his smile wider than I'd ever seen it. Eleanor's reaction was different. She showed up unannounced the next day with a list of obstetricians, all in Palo Alto, all associated with Stanford, all undoubtedly reporting back to her. "The Parker heir," she said, her hand resting on my still flat stomach in a gesture that felt more possessive than affectionate. How wonderful! I started showing at 4 months. By 5 months, I'd quit the photo retouching job at Michael's insistence. "You need to rest," he signed. "Let me take care of you." But being taken care of felt like being erased. I stopped getting calls from my design contacts. Stopped getting invited to the deaf community meetups because I couldn't explain why my deaf husband never came, why he seemed to exist only in the context of our home. My world shrank to the mansion, to doctor's appointments Eleanor often attended uninvited, to long days alone while Michael worked longer and longer hours. He started pulling away around month 6. Small things at first. He'd come home late, his face drawn and tired. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd sign, "Just work stress. The company. Nothing for you to worry about." But I did worry. I worried that he was regretting this. Regretting me. That he'd look at his pregnant black wife and realize what his mother had been implying all along, that we were too different, from 2 different worlds, that love wasn't enough. I'd catch him watching me sometimes with an expression I couldn't read. Guilt, maybe, though I didn't understand why. Sadness. Something heavy and unspoken that he couldn't put into signs. At 7 months, I tried to bridge the distance. I planned a romantic dinner, just us, no phones or notepads. I signed, "I miss you. I miss us." He signed back, "I'm right here." But he wasn't. Some essential part of him had gone somewhere I couldn't follow, somewhere silent and dark. I thought it was the pressure of becoming a father. I thought he was scared. I had no idea he was drowning in his own lies. The honesty was still on the floor between us. Yellow, soft, impossibly small. I couldn't look away from it because if I looked at Michael, if I looked at the man who'd just spoken in a voice I'd never heard, I'd shatter completely. Viola. My name in his mouth. Deep, smooth, practiced. How many times had he said it silently to himself, practicing the shape of it? "Please let me explain." Explain. The word ripped out of me. Explain what? That you can hear. That you've been able to hear this entire time. My hand went to my stomach, protective. The baby kicked hard, responding to my racing heart. He took a step forward. I took a step back. It started as a precaution, he said, and God, his voice was beautiful, which made it so much worse. After my company took off, people came out of nowhere. Old friends who'd never called. Women who suddenly found me interesting. I couldn't tell who was real anymore. So you pretended to be deaf. My voice was shaking. You pretended to have a disability to test people? Do you understand how sick that is? I needed to know who you were when you thought I couldn't hear you. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times but now looked different. Everything looked different. People say things around deaf people. True things. They let their guard down. I let my guard down because I loved you. I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. I learned an entire language for you. I immersed myself in a culture that wasn't mine because I thought, my voice broke. I thought I was building a life with someone real. I am real. This, us, the baby. Don't you dare talk about this baby. I backed against the crib we'd assembled together, him reading the wordless instructions while I signed commentary. How many moments like that had been complete lies? Every time I spoke out loud thinking you couldn't hear. Every conversation I had on the phone. Every time I cried alone in the shower. You heard all of it. His silence was answer enough. Get out, I whispered. Viola. Get out. I screamed it, and the baby kicked again, violent and frightened. You want to hear me so badly? Hear this. I don't know you. I never knew you. You're a stranger who's been living in my house wearing my husband's face. I drove to Eleanor's estate the next morning, 8 months pregnant and running on rage instead of sleep. Michael had slept in the guest house. Or hadn't slept. I didn't care. I needed answers and I knew exactly where they'd come from. Eleanor answered the door in cashmere and pearls, her expression barely flickering when she saw my swollen eyes and wrinkled clothes. Viola. What a surprise. You knew. I pushed past her into that pristine sitting room with its gallery of Parker family photos. You knew the whole time. She closed the door with a soft click. Would you like some tea? I don't want your tea, Eleanor. I want the truth. Her eyebrow raised a fraction. Good. Let her see me angry. Let her see me done performing gratitude for being allowed into her world. The truth, she said slowly, settling into her chair like we were discussing the weather, is that I've watched 3 women try to trap my son for his money. Pretty girls with sad stories and convenient timing. One actually faked a pregnancy. So you told him to fake being deaf. To manipulate people. I told him to protect himself. To observe people when they think no one important is listening. She smoothed her skirt. You'd be surprised what people reveal when they think a deaf man can't hear them talking about his money, his loneliness, his vulnerability. My hands were shaking. I loved him. I learned ASL. I gave up my career, my friends. Exactly. Eleanor's voice was sharp now, cutting. You passed every test, Viola. You were patient when others would have left. You learned to sign when others wouldn't bother. You defended him at that gala before you knew his net worth. You spoke kindly about him when you thought he couldn't hear. She paused. You signed I love you in your sleep. The room tilted. You were spying on me. Michael would tell me things. How you acted when you thought he wasn't listening. What you said on phone calls with your mother. You never once mentioned his money. Never complained about the silence. You truly seemed to love him for who you thought he was. Who I thought he was, I repeated hollowly. He's not that person, Eleanor. That person doesn't exist. No, she agreed. But your love for him was real. That's what the test was for. I looked at this woman who'd orchestrated my entire relationship like a science experiment. Congratulations, I said. You broke your son's marriage to prove I wasn't a gold digger. I moved into the east wing of the mansion that afternoon. Michael tried to help carry my things. I held up my hand, palm out, the universal sign for stop. Then I pulled out my phone and typed, "Don't touch me." He read it, his face crumbling. "Viola, please." I turned my back and kept packing. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 2 years, I'd lived in his manufactured silence. Now he'd live in mine. I stopped speaking entirely. When Michael tried to talk to me, I'd pull out a notepad and write responses in short, brutal sentences. Yes. No. Ask your mother. When he signed, I'd ignore his hands completely and write instead, "I don't sign anymore." That language was for someone who doesn't exist. At first, he tried everything. Apology notes slipped under my door. Flowers I left to die on the table. Long speeches I watched him give while staring at his mouth with no expression, the way he'd watched mine. When he finished, I'd write, "Did that make you feel better?" The baby was due in 4 weeks. My doctor asked if everything was all right at home. I smiled and said, "Fine. Just normal pregnancy stress." Michael sat beside me in the examination room, hearing every word, forbidden from responding because I'd told the doctor he was deaf and couldn't speak. Let him sit with that. Eleanor called once. I let it go to voicemail, then sent a text, "Your son can relay any important messages. Since he hears everything anyway." She didn't call again. The worst part was the moments I'd forget. I'd start to sign something across the dinner table. We still ate together, silent and terrible, and then I'd remember. My hands would freeze mid-word and I'd feel the loss all over again. That beautiful language I'd learned, that intimate vocabulary we'd built, was just another prop in his performance. 3 weeks before my due date, Michael left a note on my door. Not a text. Actual paper, like we used to do. "I know I can't fix this. I know sorry isn't enough. But I'm asking you to let me be there when our son is born. Not as your husband. Just as his father. Please." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back and slipped it under his door. "You can be in the room. But if you speak during labor, I'll have security remove you. Sign language only. Live in the lie you created." His response came an hour later, just one word in his precise handwriting. "Okay." He was finally learning what silence actually cost. My water broke at 2 in the morning, 3 days before my due date. I woke up in a puddle of fluid and panic, alone in my carefully constructed exile. For 10 full seconds, I forgot everything and almost called out for Michael. Then I remembered. I texted instead, "It's time." He was at my door in 30 seconds, still in his pajamas, eyes wild. His hands moved in frantic signs. "Hospital. Now. Are you okay?" I nodded and let him help me to the car. The contractions were already 5 minutes apart. Stamford Medical Center had the best labor and delivery unit in the area. Eleanor's recommendation, of course. The nurses spoke slowly and clearly to Michael, facing him directly. He nodded and signed thank you, and I watched him slip back into the role he'd perfected. The deaf husband. The devoted father-to-be. It made me want to scream, but another contraction hit and I was screaming anyway. Labor was 23 hours of hell. Michael stayed the entire time, signing encouragement I mostly ignored, holding my hand when I was too exhausted to push him away. The nurses thought we were a beautiful couple. "So patient with each other," one said. "You can tell he loves you." I laughed, bitter and breathless. She thought it was the pain. At hour 20, something shifted. The baby's heart rate dropped. The doctor's face went tight and professional. "We need to prep for emergency C-section. Now." They wheeled me fast, hallway lights blurring overhead. Michael ran alongside the gurney, his hand gripping mine, and I saw something I'd never seen before. Terror. Real, unfiltered, human terror. In the operating room, he sat by my head while they cut me open behind a blue curtain. His hands were shaking as he signed, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please be okay. Both of you. Please." Then he broke. "I love you," he said out loud, his voice cracking. God, Viola, I love you so much. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. A nurse glanced over, confused. Michael didn't notice. He was crying, his forehead pressed against mine. Please forgive me. Please. I can't lose you. I can't. Baby's out, the doctor called. It's a boy. And then a cry. Small, furious, alive. Our son. Michael looked at me, tears streaming down his face, all his masks finally gone. I closed my eyes and let him hold my hand. 10 years later, I'm standing in a different nursery, our daughter's room this time, listening to Michael read bedtime stories in the voice I've learned to know. Our son Ethan is 9 now, tall like his father, with my eyes and his stubbornness. Maya is 5, all questions and wild curls. Daddy, why don't you ever sign anymore? Maya asks, interrupting the story. Michael glances at me. We have a rule now, radical honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. I used to pretend I couldn't hear, he tells her simply. Before you were born. Before Ethan. It was wrong, and it hurt people, especially Mommy. Why did you pretend? Because I was scared. I thought people only wanted my money, not me. So I lied to find out the truth. He strokes her hair. But lying to find truth doesn't work. It just makes more lies. Ethan appears in the doorway, supposedly asleep in his own room. Mom was really mad, wasn't she? Furious, I say, sitting on the edge of Maya's bed. The angriest I've ever been. But you stayed, Ethan presses. He's at the age where he needs to understand how broken things get fixed. I stayed because your father spent 10 years proving he meant every apology. Because he went to therapy. Because he cut his mother off when she wouldn't apologize to me. I look at Michael. Because he signed our entire wedding vows over again, in front of a judge, and meant them for real that time. Michael's eyes meet mine. We're not healed, not completely. Some scars don't fade. I still have moments where I hear him on a phone call and feel a flash of betrayal, remembering all the calls he heard that I thought were private. He still flinches when I go quiet, afraid I'm leaving again. But we're real now. Messy and imperfect and real. The deaf community ever forgive you? I ask him after the kids are finally asleep. We're in our kitchen, our actual shared kitchen now, making tea. No, he says quietly. I appropriated their culture for a game. That's unforgivable. Good, I say. Some things shouldn't be forgiven easily. He nods, accepts it, lives with it. That's the difference. The man I married would have hidden his shame. The man I'm married to now lets me see all of it. Most days, that's enough. So that's our story. The lie that broke us. The truth that barely saved us. Some of you are probably thinking I should have left. That no amount of apologies or therapy or renewed vows erases what Michael did. You might be right. On hard days, I wonder if I made the right choice. Others are thinking I'm lucky, that he proved his love, that we made it work, that our kids have both parents. You might be right too. The truth is messier than either narrative. Marriage isn't a fairy tale or a cautionary tale. It's just two broken people deciding, every single day, whether to keep choosing each other. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered someone you loved was living a lie? Did you stay or did you leave? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, and your experience might help someone else who's standing in their own nursery, trying to decide what comes next. If this story hit you somewhere deep, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Trust me, you'll want to be here for it. And share this with someone who needs it. Someone who's loving someone complicated. Someone who needs permission to be angry. Someone who needs permission to forgive. Someone who needs to know they're not crazy for feeling both at the same time.